All right. Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. I apologize. I know a lot of you were just on. We had some technical difficulties backstage. Then as soon as I started the stream, it appeared those technical difficulties must have been only on the side of the person who was helping me out because everyone said they could hear me. I tried to reboot the stream in order to cut out all the technical testing, and then lo and behold, the moment I tried to reboot the stream, it told me I had finished the stream and so couldn't restart it. So I had to start a whole nother stream. In any case, I apologize. Welcome back to my channel, and we're going to go ahead and be doing our first live debunking. Everyone's favorite Marxist professor, Richard Wolff, has made a video for the Gravel Institute called How Capitalism Exploits You. And like a good Prager University video, except on the left, it goes on to educate you about how the labor theory of value is true and you are being exploited. Well, we're going to go ahead and do that debunking live, but I should first point out this stream is being sponsored by my friend and patron, the Dark Conservatarian. Everyone, please help him out by heading down into the description box of the stream and subscribing to his entertainment channel, which is new, and his regular channel. But without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with Richard Wolff, How Capitalism Exploits You. Okay, so we are being robbed, Richard tells us, catching our attention at the beginning. As we are freely spending our time listening to his video, someone is by force taking something that belongs to us. Now, granted, I would say we're being robbed of valuable time if all you're doing is watching this video to get educated, but we'll see what he's got to say. Okay, they're saying no audio for the video. Hang on, let me try this again. Man, I just cannot catch a break with these technical difficulties today. Oh, you know what? I know what happened. I shared the actual video, but I forgot to click the little share audio portion.
Right now, as you're listening to
all right, everybody here now?
Being robbed. A chunk of everything your hard work creates is being stolen from you. And it's a sister called capitalism that's robbing you. Every day when you check into work for your boss.
Okay, everyone can hear it now? Okay, sorry, folks. Doing it live. It's the nature of what happens. Let's start this again.
Right now, as you're listening to this, you are being robbed.
Okay, so to repeat myself, he starts off by catching everyone's attention saying you are being robbed, as you are freely taking your time, which you could be spending doing just about anything else. You are being exploited and someone is taking by force something that belongs to you. Yes, indeed, you are being robbed of precious time if this is where you're getting your education, but we'll go on to let him explain himself.
A chunk of everything your hard work creates is being stolen from you. And it's a sister called capitalism that's robbing you.
Okay, so right off the bat, he's just summed up Marx's labor theory of value. He said a chunk of the value of everything you produce is being stolen from you. But you see, that can only be true if there exists some objective value of every good or service that exists independent of how much every individual subjectively values it. And for Marx, what he said that thing was, the only thing that gives goods or services their objective value is solely the labor that was used to produce it, not the ingredients, not the factory or any of the capital. Only the labor determines what gives it value. But the problem is, no matter how much labor is used to produce something, you can't force someone else to value that thing. If you have two different burger shops, you got McDonald's hamburgers and Burger King burgers. If people only buy burgers from McDonald's because they hate the ones from Burger King, then even if it takes exactly the same amount of labor to produce the one burger, to produce both burgers, you can't force the consumer to value it. A person who cannot, an invalid, someone who can't walk, they're probably going to be willing to purchase a very high quality wheelchair. But someone who can walk isn't going to want to spend a dime on something like that. And all you have to do is live in the real world for 5 minutes to realize that ultimately something is only worth what someone else is willing to pay for it. And this goes for the wages of laborers just as much as it goes for the prices of hamburgers, houses, and cars. Let's keep going.
Every day when you check into work for your boss, you are being taken advantage of and stolen from. You're being deprived of the full value of what you contribute.
Okay, you are being deprived of the full value of what you contribute. Well, if somebody thought that they were better off doing something other than go to work, they'd be doing that other thing. The only reason people keep going to work is they're convinced that the value of the wages they're receiving exceeds the value of what they could be doing with the rest of their time. So again, this is only possible if there's some other means to derive the value of something other than what someone is willing to pay for it, which you can't function in the real world if that's the case.
Let me break it down. A capitalist isn't someone in a top hat burning library books to run a misery factory. Anyone who puts forward capital, money, to set workers in motion becomes thereby a capitalist. That is to say, they're acting as a capitalist. And what's their goal? People will tell you it's innovation or competition, but down the real world, it's pretty simple. Capitalists have one goal, and that goal is to turn a profit.
Oh, of course, and because profit is so evil. But here's the thing, profit is nothing but income minus expenses. Profit is the money that the business owner makes, leaving them better off once they've recovered all the costs it took to produce their goods and services. Anything in excess is their profit. But the thing is, even labor workers are looking to make a profit. Even if you're making a minimum wage, if you spend 1 hour working a minimum wage job, 1 hour later, you are $7.25 richer than you were before that hour, or whatever the minimum wage happens to be wherever you are. But the point is, even labor workers, they work because when they're done working, the money they've received leaves them that much richer than they were before. It is a profit. It's money they didn't have before, leaving them better off. And if you didn't believe this was worthwhile, you'd be doing something else with your time. So really, it's not just business owners that are looking to make a profit. Everyone is looking to, when they expend their time, they're hoping that they will be richer once the time is spent, whatever it is they're doing. That's not unique to business owners. It's the same thing for labor workers.
Pursuing profits to accumulate money is just how capitalism works. That's the nature of the beast. It's the single impulse of capitalism. That doesn't make capitalists personally greedy.
Incidentally, it's not capitalism that causes that. In any system, people are looking to accumulate the resources, goods, and services they need to survive and to make their lives more comfortable. That's not unique for capitalism.
Though some might be, we're not even talking about good or evil here. Capitalists need to maximize profit to the exclusion of all other considerations, or they'll get eaten up by capitalists who are smarter or more ruthless than them.
Okay, that's because in a capitalist system, profit tells you whether or not you're giving the consumer what they want. If you have two competing businesses that are producing the same kind of good or service, like I said before, I used the example of McDonald's and Burger King, but only businesses that are creating a sufficient amount of value for their consumers are going to make a profit. If businesses focus on anything other than profit, it shows they don't really care about whether or not the consumer is getting what they want. And there will be no way to tell whether or not what they're creating is of any value. Now, and under capitalism, that's why the system works so well. A lack of profit or losses are just as important as profit. It tells producers what to stop doing. Whereas under a command economy, where a couple central planners tell everyone what to produce, you have the feedback from the consumers is not instantaneous. The central planners can keep telling the producers to keep making whatever it is they're making for a far longer period of time, whether it's what the people actually want or not, which is why, of course, be it the Soviet Union, be it Venezuela, be it any of these other socialist experiments, they always end up with a huge surplus of things people don't need or want, and a severe shortage of the things people actually want or need, because without profit, there's no way to tell, without that profit incentive driving production, there's no way to tell whether or not the people are actually getting what they want. Sure, you can survey the people and ask them, but by the time that information gets to the central planners, the needs and wants of the people have already changed. So when he says under capitalism, if you don't pursue profit, you'll be eaten up by someone smarter or more ruthless than them. If you don't pursue profit, you're not going to give the consumer what they want. They will buy from someone else, and that business will prosper as opposed to yours.
That's the jungle law of the market. So capitalists need profit to survive. But where does this profit come from? And that's where you come in. Literally, profit comes from you. Here's a
Okay, I'm going to stop there quick. Profit comes from you. That's partially true in as much as without workers, a business can't produce its own goods and services, or at least the business owner without his workers isn't going to be able to produce them nearly as fast or efficiently without his workers. But it's more than, there's more than just money, workers, and business owners here. You got consumers, you've got the capital, the stuff you need to produce it, the ingredients, the machinery and equipment and resources. The workers can't produce things without that capital, which is provided by and paid for by the business owner. And without the customers, there is no income at all. So profit, whether it's the profit the business owner is making in excess to whatever he spent on the capital and paying his workers, whether it's the profit the labor workers are making for the time they're being paid for their labor, or whether it's the satisfaction that the consumers get out of the good or service that they're purchasing, profit or value only comes from individuals trading things because they see whatever they obtain as subjectively more valuable than whatever it is that they gave up. Were this not the case, they would not have made the exchange. If the laborer thought his time was better spent doing something other than working, he wouldn't have agreed to take the job. If the business owner thought that his time was better spent doing something other than running his business, he wouldn't have started the business. He wouldn't be paying his workers what he offered them. And were the consumer convinced their money was better spent somewhere else, they wouldn't be buying the good or service that they're currently buying. So, although it's partially true, profit comes from you. It's not just the labor workers. It's all the whole system working together.
A little thought experiment. Meet Harold. Harold has a chain of buildings full of kitchens, full of ingredients. But Harold doesn't know how to make a burger himself.
Oh, are you kidding me? You really expect me to believe that a guy who owns a restaurant doesn't know how to make a burger himself? Now, as Wolff pointed out there, the guy who owns the restaurants, or the guy who owns a chain of restaurants, he owns the restaurant facility. He owns the kitchen. He owns the kitchen equipment, and he purchases the ingredients. But somehow he just doesn't know how to make a burger. I mean, that's ridiculous in and of itself. But how exactly did he come to get all those things? I mean, someone had to construct that kitchen equipment. He had to obtain the money, whether it was from working himself another job prior, whether it was from a loan. Harold is the one who had to do the work to actually get all those things. And even if he opens his restaurant chain, there's no guarantee that the consumers are going to want whatever it is he's about to sell. So he hires the workers. Presumably, he hires the workers for promising them a certain amount wage for how many hours they work. And he also promises to pay them this whether the consumers actually purchase the burgers or not. So we'll keep going. But as Captain Pipsqueak so aptly said, how does Harold get those things in the first place? Exactly. Harold has to do a lot of hard work to accumulate the capital necessary to acquire the restaurant and all the equipment, or he has to take a risk and take out a loan, knowing that if his restaurant goes under, he's still going to have to pay the bank back.
Harold gets someone to make enough burgers that he can sell them and turn up profit. It's not a trick question. He pays you because you know how to make really good burgers.
Yeah, you know how to make really good burgers, but the guy who purchased all the equipment and restaurant doesn't know how to make a burger.
The money he uses to pay you is what we call capital. That's money used to set production into motion.
Okay, again, partially true. The money that he pays his workers can be considered capital, but capital is more than just money. Capital is the restaurant, the building itself. Capital is the kitchen. Capital is the cooking equipment. Capital is all the ingredients that it takes to make the burger. Again, Harold's laborers do not have those things apart from Harold. Harold is the one who had to either put in the work to accumulate enough capital to construct or purchase those things himself, or he took on the risk of taking a loan from the bank to purchase all those things, knowing that if his restaurant goes under, he still has to pay the bank back. So capital is way more than just the money he's paying his laborers. The laborers are the ones taking the least amount of risk. The laborers, if they work for Harold, Harold had better follow through on his contract and pay them for the amount of time they're working, even if at the end of the day, no one comes into his restaurant or purchases any burgers. And I'll remind you again, had Harold's laborers, the chef or whoever else, not been convinced that their time was better spent working for Harold than it was spent doing something else, they would not be working for Harold. They only do it because they're convinced the money that he's paying them is worth more than the time they're spending working there.
let's say Harold spent $1,000 buying all the ingredients in the restaurant. And after you worked for a few weeks there, turning the ingredients into burgers, they brought in $3,000. Not bad. You added $2,000 worth of value to the ingredients.
Okay, now again, this is the labor theory of value. According to Karl Marx, the only value that was created in this transaction is the value of the laborer putting the burger together. The amount of money that Harold spent on the restaurant, on the cooking equipment, on the kitchen itself, on marketing and advertising, on the ingredients, all that doesn't create any value. The only thing that created any value was what's-his-face taking the ingredients and slapping them together, or throwing them on the grill and slapping it together. That's the only value. None of the hard work that Harold did to make all those things come together so that the cook could actually put it together created any kind of value. Well, really, where did that $2,000 profit, where did it come from? Well, presumably just because this, obviously we know in a real restaurant there's a lot more that goes into it than this, but just for the sake of argument, using this easy example, Harold spent $1,000 getting all the ingredients and paying his worker. Then he sold enough hamburgers to produce $3,000 of income. So after the first $1,000 worth of hamburgers were sold, Harold broke even, and the additional $2,000 in sales is Harold's profit. And what Wolff is saying is that $2,000 rightly belongs to the labor worker because they're the only one who created any value. But again, the labor worker had no kitchen, had no equipment, had no ingredient apart from Harold. And the labor worker can't force the consumer to purchase the burger. The consumers purchased the burger. Presumably, they purchased burgers from Harold because those burgers were better than the burgers that Bob was selling across the street. Bob might have not sold any burgers because his burgers were crappy, but Harold's burgers were good. So again, without Harold, the worker does not have any money in the first place. It's only because Harold and the worker came together and agreed they were both better off making the exchange. Harold agreed that he was better off not having the money he was paying his cook, and his cook agreed he was better off not having the time he spent making those burgers. And as it turns out, yes, they both benefited from the transaction. Now the cook can claim he deserves more of the profit than Harold was willing to pay him, but he should have articulated that beforehand. He agreed before he started working this job how much he was going to get paid. And you have to remember, Bob across the street, who has another restaurant, just people didn't like Bob's Burgers. Sorry, Fox, but they didn't like his burgers because they weren't as good. But Bob still had to pay his workers even though he didn't turn a profit because he made that agreement. Now, as is the case with some businesses, like a lot of sales businesses, for example, salesmen make commission. For every sale they make, they get to keep a portion of that profit. But if they don't sell anything, they don't make anything. So really, that's depending on what kind of business, it's all about what risk you're willing to take. If you're willing to enter into a contract saying, I get X percentage of the profits for everything I sell, you might make more money than a person who's making an hourly wage, but you also might make nothing if you don't sell anything. The greater the risk, the greater the reward.
But wait, you don't get all the money because Harold now has $3,000 on his hands. $1,000 of that is just making up for the cost of the ingredients. And if you were paid for the full value of your labor, you'd be making $2,000. But then Harold would only be breaking even on the burgers, and he needs to make a profit in order to survive.
Yes, because if Harold breaks even, he is no better off than before he started his business. If Harold has exactly as much money as he did before he started this business, how is he any better off? Why would he start the business in the first place? He wouldn't, which would mean that his laborers would not have jobs, they would not have the money they made from his business, and they would have to find money elsewhere. In order for this system to work, every player in this transaction has to be better off. Harold has to have more money than he did before he starts the business, or else his business is going to close. If he's taking losses, he can't keep the business open. The laborers have to be making more money than they would just sitting around doing something else. And need you forget, if another guy, let's call him Derek, comes along and starts another burger joint, he says to Harold's laborers, you know what, I'll pay you twice as much as Harold's paying you to come make burgers for me, then they're going to leave Harold because Derek is offering them a better deal. And the consumer, of course, the consumer only buys the burger in as much as they want the burger because they're convinced the satisfaction they get from eating that burger is worth more to them than the value of keeping their money. In order for the consumer and the laborer and Harold to benefit in this situation. They all have to be better off than they were before. Otherwise, the business, if even one player isn't satisfied at the end of this, the business will close. Either if the laborer is not satisfied, he'll go get a job somewhere else. If the business owner isn't satisfied, the business will close. And if the consumer is not satisfied, then again, the business will close. So if Harold pays all $2,000 to his laborers, no business would ever succeed. This is just ridiculous.
So Harold does not pay you for the full value of your labor. Maybe
again, full value of your labor. Value is subjective. It's only because Marx just unilaterally declared that the only thing that makes something valuable is how much labor is put into it. But suppose I make a statue out of cow manure. I go into a field of cattle, I scoop up their manure, I mold it into a statue and then heat it until it's hard. And I've got this awesome, really good looking statue made of cow manure that took me it took me 10 hours to build. Just because it took me 10 hours of labor doesn't mean anyone wants a statue made of cow manure. I can't force the consumer to want that because value is subjective. Again, an invalid, someone who can't walk, is going to be willing to spend money on a wheelchair. Someone who can walk is not. If you live in the Caribbean, you're not going to be willing to spend any of your money on a winter coat. But if you live in the Arctic, you are. How valuable something is only as valuable as someone is willing to pay for it. If Harold is willing to pay $10 an hour to his cook to make burgers for him, and the cook accepts, that means that they both agree that's what their labor is worth. If the cook thought his labor was worth $12 an hour, he'd go find someone who was willing to do that. Marxists just have to childishly declare that is how valuable it is. And the funny thing is, they will acknowledge this subjective reality when you point out things like the invalid who wants to spend his money on a wheelchair, or the guy in the Caribbean not wanting to spend their money on a winter coat. And yet they'll still insist to the death that, yes, because subjective value exists, but we're talking about objective value. Well, that objective value is meaningless if nobody is subjectively willing to spend money on it.
He pays you just 1,000 of the value you produce. Maybe he pays you 1,500. No matter what, you've been stolen from. You spent more of your labor than you were compensated for.
And again, Harold made nothing in that transaction. Suppose Harold gives his cook all $2,000. He is no better off than he was before he started this business. How was Harold compensated? Was Harold not the one who acquired the restaurant, who acquired the kitchen, who acquired the equipment, who acquired all the ingredients? Why is it that everything Harold did to create this business and manage it wasn't worth anything? Apparently it wasn't, because all that money supposedly belonged to the laborer. It's funny how every minimum wage worker thinks their manager does absolutely nothing because they're sitting in an office while they're working. I take any one of them, put them in their manager's position, and most of them would break down from the pressure. Not anyone can be a manager. And really, the value of someone's labor tends to be correlated with how many other people are capable of performing that labor. We'll get to that point in a minute.
But here's the dirty truth. The story doesn't end with you and Harold. This process plays out across your city or town, your state, the country, the entire world. The rich get richer, and the little guy barely gets by.
Okay, now I do happen to agree that in a country like the United States and many westernized nations around the world, we do see the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. This really isn't the point of debunking this video, although that largely has to do with how the government meddles in the market. We do not have a free market. We have a corporatist system where there are a lot of free transactions taking place, but governments set up rules and regulations that basically force larger businesses' competition out of the market and increases their market share artificially, which leads to them getting richer and the poor getting poorer. That has a lot to do with government policies that keep people out of work, like the minimum wage, welfare, and other things that really I'm not going to go into right now because that's not the purpose of this video. But in a solely free market, the person that is making the least amount of money is creating the least amount of value for the most amount of people. The person making the most money in a free market is creating the most money for the most amount of people. I'm going to say that one more time. In a free market, the person making the least amount of money is the person creating the least value for the least people. The person making the most money is creating the most value for the most people. Now, just using Wolff's example here, Harold is creating a lot of value for a lot of people. By starting his business, he's creating value for his laborers, who are now making more money than they were just sitting around. He's creating value for his customers, who are getting the meals they need. And even though he has a lot of laborers who are capable of making burgers, Harold is the only one, at least in this scenario, who's demonstrated that he can manage the business effectively, such that he's creating value for presumably hundreds, if not thousands, of consumers. The cooks that are making the burgers, they're creating value for Harold. They're creating value for the individual. They're indirectly creating value for the consumer. But the amount of value they're creating is far less than Harold because of the amount of work Harold's done to make all this come together. And further, there are a lot of people who can make burgers. There are not a lot of people like Harold who can effectively run a business. Therefore, the more people are capable of doing a particular task, the less value you're going to be able to derive out of it. The reason professional athletes, models, and entertainers are making so much money is because they're creating so much value for millions and millions of people, all of which are willing to give a little bit of their money towards those people.
We call the process, a boss is stealing from you, exploitation.
Yeah, you can call it whatever you want. It doesn't change the fact that in a free market, every player is using their time as they see fit. Every person is making the exchange they're making because they are convinced that they are better off having made the exchange than not having made the exchange. And before you come to me with the whole, you either work or you starve, that is not from capitalism. That is from reality itself. No system, whether it's capitalism, whether it's socialism, whether you're one person living in the middle of the Sahara Desert, work or starve is derived from reality itself. There is no system that's ever going to be the case where you're going to get food and resources and things you need just pop into thin air without anyone doing any work.
We don't mean that in an emotional sense about how we feel about it, but something that's actually a documented economic phenomenon. The gap between how much the worker produces and how much they get paid. Exploitation is a universal feature of capitalist economies.
Oh, but it's not a feature of socialist economies? Because last I checked, if you look at what's going on in Venezuela right now, Maduro, he's sure eating well and living large while his people are starving. Same was true in the Soviet Union. Same was true in Cuba. It's funny how in countries with command economies, the people at the top, the central planners, want for nothing. They're living in mansions, eating all the, smoking fancy cigars, eating steaks and drinking wine while their people are starving. So how is this not exploitation?
And it never ends. The system requires more and more exploitation, paying workers less, making them work more, or making them more productive without increasing their wages.
Okay. The system relies on not increasing workers' wages. No, the system relies on making work more efficient. Now, it's true. If a company pays its workers less, they can then charge less for the product, which means more people are going to be able to afford that product, and thereby frees up labor and resources elsewhere. If you can make the same product using less labor than you could before, you can pay fewer people and sell it for less. That temporarily means some workers are going to lose their jobs. But as their labor is freed up, as fewer resources are being used to create the goods and services people want, then those additional goods and services, those additional labor workers inevitably shift into other industries and everybody benefits. Only by learning how to make things more efficiently do we have all the prosperity we have today. I mean, if you go back to when people were farming with no tools and with no advanced tools or farm equipment, everyone was a farmer. Why? Because if every person did not spend 14 hours a day out in the fields, people would starve. It's only by discovering more efficient ways to farm the food we need that enough time was freed up that people could spend their time doing other things. Building wagons and saddles and horseshoes, which thereby makes travel more efficient. Later on, we get automobiles, and every other innovation, one way or another, caused a lot of people to lose their jobs. But as those people's labor was freed up, as the producers needed fewer resources to produce the things that people wanted and needed, then it allowed people to use that additional time and resources to create all the modern conveniences of today. This is not a bad thing.
When you see in the newspaper that a corporation's recording record profits, that is what they are doing. Your hard work is producing more value, but you're not getting enough compensation in return. There are tens of thousands of Harolds out there, but billions of people just like you. You and Harold are two different types of people. You belong to two different classes. There's a capitalist who owns the means to produce goods and services, and there's the workers who only have their own labor to survive on.
Okay, I'm going to direct everyone to a video I made a couple of years back called Kate Upton Debunks Karl Marx on the Labor Theory of Value. Or, excuse me, Kate Upton debunks Karl Marx on class theory. So what Wolff has just articulated here is the Marxist class theory. Basically, in the economy, there are only two classes: the capitalists who own the means of production, the factories, the equipment, the ingredients, and then there are people who use, and then there are people who submit their labor. It's just that easy. Two classes, and the people who own the means of production are exploiting others. Well, as I explained in that video, Kate Upton, she's a supermodel. She doesn't own the cameras or studios where she shoots. All she does is sell her labor for a wage. Yet she's a multimillionaire and in the 1%. How is this the case? Because it's not strictly a matter of who owns the means of production and who doesn't. It's about how much value are you personally creating for how many people. Both the janitor who works at that studio and the supermodel are both trading their labor to the people who own the means of production in exchange for a wage. But the wage that the owner is willing to pay is based on how much value that person specifically brings to the table, whether or not he can find someone else who can bring additional amounts of value, which is why the Marxist trope about how it's just those that own the means of production and those that don't is far oversimplified. You have lawyers and teachers and doctors who provide intangible services based on the knowledge they have. You have professional athletes and models who, based on their physical beauty or their talent, are able to create value for millions of people because millions of people are willing to pay to watch them do their thing. It's way oversimplified. In a capitalist free market system, the person making the most money is creating the most value for the most people, and the person making the least money is creating the least value for least people. How is this unfair?
The capitalists appropriate the value that the workers' labor creates and keep it for themselves. And you are not immune from it. At any job you work at, the condition of your employment is that you produce more by your labor than you get paid.
No, you and your employer and the customer have to be better off making the exchange. That is the condition of employment. Your employer has to be better off with you. He has to value your labor more than the money he's using to pay you. You have to value the wage more than you value your time, and the consumer has to value the good or service more than they value the money. That is the condition. Every person alive wants more than they're currently making, but they're only going to make as much value as they're willing to create. Any one of these laborers is free to start their own business. The problem is not everyone is savvy enough and willing to put in the work to do so.
So in the capitalist system, no one is paid what they're worth. All profit is value extraction, and that means that all profit is theft from you. This is Richard.
Okay, so that's the end of the video, and he gives his little shout out. This is Richard Wolff for the Gravel Institute. Okay, so you voluntarily entering into an agreement with an employer where he agrees to pay you for a certain amount for your wages in exchange for your time, that is theft. But someone actually breaking down your door, taking something off at gunpoint and giving it to someone else, that's not. Because make no mistake, that is actively what Richard Wolff advocates. Someone like Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, they have way too much money. Richard Wolff would absolutely support men with guns breaking down their doors, stealing their money, and redistributing it to others. Or whether it's money, whether it's resources, Richard Wolff advocates the forcible redistribution of wealth. So voluntary agreements in which both parties benefit, that is theft, according to Richard Wolff. Taking someone else's things by force and giving them to someone else, that is not theft. Did I miss something? And Nixer says here, LOL, professor of economics. Yes, please bear in mind that Richard Wolff had students who were involved in the government of Greece, the same government of Greece that absolutely collapsed after implementing failed socialist policies. Ninjaz1432, they just want free money. That's all it was ever about. Indeed, it was. Now, quickly, I have to say again, this particular stream was sponsored by my longtime friend, the Dark Conservatarian, so I'm going to go ahead and give him a shout out here. Just give me a minute.
Hello everybody, it is the Dark Conservatarian, and I'd like to thank my 2 cents for allowing me the opportunity on his channel to promote my second channel, Dark Con Entertainment. Here I do gaming streams, gaming highlights, hangout streams, response streams, showcases of my comic project, and the occasional movie review. If this is something that interests you, then I highly welcome you to come check it out. I highly recommend starting off with my Ratchet & Clank movie review, Mind the Off Balance audio that just recently got unblocked from the copyright block it had originally, and so now it's hurting in the algorithm. Also, for all of you who have already checked out my main channel and subscribed, be sure to check that you're still subbed, because it's suspected and even proven that YouTube is automatically unsubscribing people from my main channel without them knowing. Hope to see you all later. God bless.
Everyone, please help out the Dark Conservatarian. The link to his new channel, Dark Con Entertainment, and the link to his main channel, the Dark Conservatarian, are in the description of this stream. I also have already posted the sources I use preparing for this stream on my website, my2centsvideos.com. I will get that link and a pinned comment in this new stream. I do like what Keith Hill has said here. I still haven't heard Richard answer the question. If he wants a business that works off his socialist idea, then why don't they just start it? Capitalism doesn't stop these places of business. And indeed it doesn't. Nothing stops the other workers from starting their own businesses. The question is, do they possess the skill necessary to manage and run that business? And the answer is no, not everyone does. Jonathan O., how could someone be a professor in economics yet be against capitalism? Quite the oxymoron. Indeed, I seriously doubt Richard Wolff doesn't understand these things. Wolf Virgo says you should debate Vaush. I kind of doubt he's going to want to debate me given the size of my channel, but thank you. All right, and perhaps best summed up here, Grambo, what a cringe fest. Indeed it was. Anyways, guys, thanks for checking out the stream. Please, again, the stream was sponsored by the Dark Conservatarian. Help him out. Subscribe to both his channels. Links are in the description. And as always, that is my 2 cents. And I apologize for all the technical difficulties. We had to reboot this stream twice and then started over again because I wasn't sharing the audio. Such is the nature of doing these things live. But I do like doing these things live a lot better because I can actually interact with your comments while we're doing the stream, which I can't with regular videos. Not to say there aren't more regular videos coming. They will be, but we will be doing a lot more live stuff as well. So thank you for checking it out. And as always, that is my 2 cents. Take it for what it's worth.